I mean, we can do it in one. Okay. Yeah.
Neil.
You can do it.
Good, how are you?
One that you-
Keeping your head above water?
applicants have to sign. One person is like.
Just saw it today, if you paid it to
Really, like,
they know that.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, it's your turn to say, well, I'm-
Yeah, there's certain things
I
like,
think
I'm
it's more
sorry,
the
you have to
humidity,
go
you know, it's
into,
more like the
like
stickiness.
Alan,
kind of.
you talk to the zoning people, you need people there.
Yeah.
Which is-
Oh, yeah. A lot of alumni, most of them, like maybe, not, they might, they all sometimes, but
Yeah.
I think the alumni agents who write violations,
Yeah,
they never come to they work from home, out in the field.
Good evening, everyone. This is Monday, May 20th. This is, meeting of the Harrisburg Zoning Hearing Board. Calling the meeting to order. I'm Clark West, Chairman of the Board, to my right, Bob, right, to my left. This is so great, which is not tonight. Right on the right is Mr. O'Connor. He's our solicitor. We have for our meeting, we basically have a court reporter. This is a criminal meeting. And court makes a transcript of the event of the appeal to the court of common pleas. Must be based on fact and law, not the popularity or unpopularity of the cause or what seems to support to be a good or bad cause. In other words, applicant must meet a legal burden of proof that proves the evidence of the variance or acceptance of the case. The law is the zoning code for city of Harrisburg and field district attorney. I invite you to the audience to point out, they must speak, but they must be close proximity to the property in question. And the speak must be something legally relevant to the elements of the report. I will speak one time, but I'm not the legal version. Case, in cases where the applicant has already properly circumstances for the meeting, and then zoning board will take the case. What would we do? What do you think they would say, in the majority decision, in the case of a tie, which means a tie, decision. Interviews on the director of planning, Jeffrey Knight. Okay, who will be presenting the request. To the private plan.
I'm sorry, Tirsa Cameron, Deputy City Solicitor.
And our city solicitor, Mr. Grove.
Good evening, sir.
So with that, all we will now start. We will basically start with the deadline, swear and all anybody who's not because we the law. So I swear.
I do. Read in the exhibits here, and then we'll go on, and then you can swear in the applicant, and applicant witnesses, but, so this is application 2580, 1728 North Second Street, correct? Okay. The exhibits, board exhibits, so we got B1 as a proof of publication in Patriot News, May 5th, May 12th of this year. B2 is a letter sent from the planning director to the applicant notifying of the letter, May 16, 2024. B3 is a hearing notice posted on the property. B4 is applicant's notification letter, certificate of mailing to the required neighbors. B5 is the application. B6 are plans for the proposal. B7 are photos of the property. B8 is a one-page, it's a map of a parcel of the property. B9 is a prior or a zoning hearing board decision pertaining to the property. B10 is 2024 property and tax information for the property. B11 is a deed to the property establishing standing to pursue zoning relief. B12, Planning Bureau case report. And B13 is the City of Harrisburg Planning Commission resolution. So we have 13 exhibits.
Yep. So the current application before the board is a proposal to expand the existing supportive housing family use that has been and will continue to be operated by Gadenzia to more than 8 individuals and to request relief from the associated off-street parking requirements, which requires approval of a special exception from the zoning hearing board. Alternatively, they are requesting to be allowed to provide the required off-street parking at a property located further than 500 feet per section 7-327.5A of the zoning code, which requires approval of a variance from the zoning hearing board. So the first issue, and I would say the principal request before the board here, is requesting relief from the off-street parking requirements for a supportive housing family use. The off-street parking requirements are one space per unit, and units are bedrooms in this kind of living arrangement. And so overall, there will be 9 bedrooms on the second and third proposed bedrooms on the second and third floors of the property. And so they would be required to have 9 off-street parking spaces. There are 2 spaces on site accessible from Kelker Street. In reviewing this, I note that the ZHB solicitor read into record a prior case. And the reason that was presented was to kind of give some background to the issue, and because the off-street parking previously, I guess, agreed upon in that case is no longer being provided. And so this is kind of being reviewed in light of that as well. And in that earlier case from 1998, the applicants had gotten approval for relief from providing the off-street parking on the specific property with the understanding that they would secure 2 spaces at the Tri-County Association of the Blind, which is the property just to the north in Kelker Street, and 2 spaces at another property owned by the applicant at 1910 North 2nd Street. The property, the Tri-County Association of the Blind, has been sold, and presumably the lease for those spaces terminated. And it should be noted that the applicant is also intending on selling the property at 1910 North 2nd Street. They do have another property at 2043 North 2nd Street. So they do have another property relatively within the vicinity of this property at which parking can be provided if so required by the board. You'll note, like throughout the case report and then the resolution, it mentions that it's just outside of the 500-foot range. That was on the presumption that it would be provided at 1910 North 2nd Street, but upon further discussion with the applicants, they had indicated that that property is for sale, and so if the parking needed to be provided elsewhere off-site, it could be provided at 2043 North 6th Street. Now, the real proximate issue when it comes to this is the fact that the residents are not permitted to have vehicles. So really, when it comes down to it, the only vehicles that will be on site or will be driven to the site will be for staff. And they have staff who rotate around 24 hours a day in shifts around the clock. And I think they had noted during their planning commission testimony that there'd only be approximately 2 staff on hand at any one time, and they can provide a bit more information about what those staffing levels look like. But what that means from a practical perspective is that the 2 spaces that they do have on site are actually enough to accommodate the needs of the use, regardless of how many individual residents are on, because none of the residents are permitted by their regulations to own or to have vehicles on site. This is not something that's just like a discouraged type of thing. It's a requirement of their stay there. So while the request is effectively for relief from 7 of the required off-street parking spaces, due to the nature of the operations and the prohibition against tenants owning vehicles, the Planning Bureau and the Planning Commission do believe that the applicants have met their burden of proof. With that being said, the Planning Commission recommends that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request for the following reasons. The applicant has submitted 2 alternatives for providing relief from the requested expansion of the existing supportive housing family use, a proposal which would otherwise be permitted by right. Both requests are reasonable, given that the residents are not permitted to have vehicles, which will reduce the potential impact from the expansion of the facility's occupancy, and that the alternative site for the provision of any required off-street parking is located outside of the allowable 500-foot buffer. And in discussions with neighbors, they've indicated that the applicant's facility has been a benefit to the neighborhood and that they appreciate the informal surveillance provided by residents on site. And expansion in the number of residents should increase the positive impacts of the existing facility.
My name is David Slinger. My Cadenza address is at 106 West Main Street, Norristown, Pennsylvania, 19403.
My name's Sean Delaney from Stevens and Lee. I'm a land use counsel for the applicant, and I did give my card to this stenographer.
I do. Well, Cadenza has been there, and it's been a residential facility for us for 30 years or so. It has a couple different uses over those years, and with the restriction of 8, I can tell you that we've been offering services at that facility for the most part at a loss. That is, any program that requires staffing and 24-hour staffing. If you do the math, the per diem from funding that we get for providing these services, it has us operating at a loss.
Mr. Slinger, could you explain what actually the use is, what we're doing at the property?
Sure. Now is a program for women. It's a it's a licensed step-down facility for women who've completed drug and alcohol treatment already. This is a facility where they can come and stay, but are free to go out and look for work. Most of them don't have cars. We tend to deal with people that are Medicaid funded, burn all the bridges in their lives, so they're not showing up with cars to begin with. But it's an opportunity for them to get their lives back together there. They stay for 3 to 6 months and then move on with their lives. And actually we have a very formal graduation process at the end.
And do any of your residents work while they're at the house?
Yes, some go out to work.
And I believe it was in the application, Director Knight said this, but the residents of this facility are not permitted to have vehicles.
No, they're not permitted to have vehicles.
Okay. Is there adequate public transportation in the area for them to get around?
There is.
And does Gaudensia provide any shuttle service to doctor's appointments, job, anything like that?
Yeah, if people need some, if the most practical thing is to either, like say if someone is new in the program and they don't have money, we may help them with public transportation to go to job interviews, et cetera. But if there's assistance that they need, we do drive people to various appointments, doctor's appointments or appointments with legal appointments, whatever. But they also do go, since, at this level of care, since they're allowed to come and go, for the most part, they go to those things on their own, but at times we do, transport them.
And Director Knight reflected a conversation that we had that was based on conversations I had with neighbors. The comment being that having the residents there adds an additional layer of security and just sort of some eyes on the street. Are there actual security measures? Do you have security cameras on the
Yes, we
outside of
have,
the building?
all of our, Gedenzi has invested a large amount of money in security cameras. We have, security cameras at all of our facilities, that we can monitor, remotely, and they've been very helpful in all kinds of, areas. I can't tell you the number of times I've been called by police about the security cameras outside of our, not this facility, but throughout our agency that, you know, like in my office in Norristown, I've gotten calls about the cameras outside. Been asked to provide footage to the police, which I've done personally at least 5 times.
Before I go through the nature of the request, why we're here tonight, the special exception request, does the board have any questions for Mr. Slinger regarding the operation of the facility at 1728 North 2nd?
Mr. Slinger, what's your position? You work for Goodenzia, right? What's your position there?
My position now is I'm chief executive for real estate. I've been at Gedenzi for, I'm actually a graduate of Gedenzi. I came to Gedenzi into treatment 43 years ago,
Oh, okay.
and I've been working there for 41 years.
Okay.
And I've had many different positions over those years. So I was involved in buying, when we bought this building and when we renovated the building and opened that program.
And for this, you were talking about public transportation, that sometimes, you know, you may provide a shuttle, but otherwise, what, they would be able to catch a bus, right?
Sure.
That's mainly how they would probably get around?
Yeah.
All right.
And
And
just
it,
to
this
be-
is, it's not uncommon that, you know, the fact that we heard positive comments from the neighbors. Of course, many people, when we first try to open programs, are nervous about what we do and the kind of services that we offer. But that is a very common, because Gedenzi has 100 locations throughout Pennsylvania and several other states. And it's very common that after we open, people change their minds. They realize that we are actually a positive force in their neighborhood.
And when you said, right, that they're, and the question was that they are not permitted to have vehicles, is that something they sign, or do they just?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's no way they could have vehicles there without, you know, without us knowing it. And we, you know, obviously we monitor people's comings and goings. We have cameras around the whole facility, inside and outside. It's, and it's not, like I said, it's not really an issue because the nature of the client that we deal with, they don't have cars.
Right, that's what I was thinking too. Okay.
They, even if we didn't have the rule, they wouldn't have cars. It's not part of their reality for the most part.
Right. They wouldn't, right, have the means or whatever. Okay.
And one thing I think that's important to note is this is a service that is serving this community. Gedenzi used to actually have a facility at the former state hospital that had to be closed. So there is pressure on the existing facilities that they have, which is part of the nature of the request. But so essentially, as Director Knight went through, we have a situation here where we have a use that does not require the required parking. And the required parking is 1 space per unit. A unit is a bedroom. We have 9 bedrooms. That is different than under the prior ordinance. There was looking at the number of people and staff, but that's what we're looking at right now. Section 7327.8 of the code allows the zoning hearing board on a special exception approval basis to reduce the number of required parking spaces when appropriate. There's a list of 5 criteria, and it's not an and, it's an or and or. So
right.
The first is that there's adequate commercial and public parking available in the vicinity. There is adequate parking because we don't need any parking because our residents aren't allowed cars. I mean, it is at certain times of day, certain times of the week, can be a challenging place to park, and there were some spaces that were lost right at this intersection at Second and Kelker when the roundabout was put in, but there is adequate parking provided because we don't need any. We have 2 spaces on site. We have on average 2 employees on site. Actually, on the weekends, it's only 1. Second is that there's public transportation is available and that it is adequate, and that another potential is that there's either car share or some other service that's provided, and that's the Gaudenzia shuttle, which is available as needed. So personally, I think that there's justification for the request. I think there's justification for considering and approving the request. It is a special exception, so the board obviously has the legal requirements that the chair went through. It's section 7323.6, subsection B. There's 7 criteria. One is that the use is not clearly in conflict with city ordinances. The ordinance actually provides for this, so it is coherent with it. The use has to include proper traffic ingress and egress with vehicles and pedestrians. We did put in the application. There are multiple entrances to the building. There is street access, a curb cut for the parking spaces that are off of Kelker Street. So I believe there is proper ingress and egress to the property. We have to show that there will not be a significant public safety hazard, including fire, toxic, or explosive hazards. This is at its heart a residential use that has been conducted for decades. I don't believe that it provides any hazard. The 4th criteria is that the use will not negatively affect or significantly affect the neighborhood or the zoning district in which it's located. This use is permitted by right. There's no construction that is proposed. We're basically looking at expanding the use inside the building in rooms that are already there. So I would not see that there'd be an impact on the character of the community. In fact, a part of the community now. Plan screening, walls, berms, site layout. Again, there's no construction proposed, so that doesn't really apply in this situation. Environmental compliance standards, performance standards in section 6. It's not an issue for us. We have cleaning equipment to clean the bathrooms, that's about it. And as far as historically significant architecture, to show that any changes will minimize any changes to anything that's historically significant. I don't believe that the building is historically significant, but it is interesting. As Mr. Knight said, a mix of vernacular styles, but regardless, there's no changes proposed to the building. So I believe that the applicant has satisfied the criteria for the granting of a special exception, and it would be appropriate for the board to consider that.
Questions?
Is anybody else here?
Anybody else in the audience?
1728.
My question is, you answered my question. Good. I just have one thing. Currently have a customer there, and you're accusing them of fraud and listening to a question. Basically, cost, because it's an economically feasible.
Right. And, because we are a large agency, we have lots of facilities, we can, at any given time, we can have a facility that's losing money year after year. But ultimately, that becomes problematic. And this facility hasn't lost money every year for quite some time. And, it's subsidized by other facilities that have positive cash flow. But it's almost impossible to run a facility for 8 people with 24-hour staffing. You don't see much of that. And we haven't really decided exactly how many people we have to figure out, how many offices we need. We'll obviously comply with whatever the space requirements are.
But to that point, in the interest of candor to the tribunal, the number 12 was a relic of a prior application from, I think, 2006. The current zoning basically requires that the use has to comply with code, building code and every other applicable code. The requirement is that there, if you look at the bedrooms, there has to be a minimum of 50 square feet per resident per bedroom. That's actually less than the state requirement, and the property and the applicant are licensed by the state. The state actually requires 60 square feet per resident per room. So the request is potentially for more than 12. It's based on the codes that exist today for the use of the building.
We do get, I don't know where all of the referrals come from. They would come from the county or from another, some of them could come from other Gedenzi facilities that they've completed treatment there, or it could come from another drug and alcohol treatment facility where they've completed treatment.
And there's an outpatient, well, where the parking is 2.5 blocks up the streets, right across from the governor's mansion. That's an outpatient facility. So there's a wide network.
Yeah, where
in the
Gedenzi
community.
has operated drug and alcohol treatment programs and services in Harrisburg since around 1972. Currently we have a place on Chambers Hill Road in Portara. We have a place at 2835 North Front Street. We have an outpatient in Mechanicsburg. We have an outpatient up the street, on Second Street, and we have an apartment building next door to that. And we used to have 2 programs on the grounds at the state hospital, which we had to, we've been told we had to close them like 15 years ago, but it's finally happened. We're out of there.
The other property that 2043 North 2nd Street, is that the one that you were just mentioning? That's like
Yeah.
a couple of blocks, 2.5 blocks?
It's a little further, I think, than 2.5 blocks from this location, but
Right, the one that they were talking about before that was just beyond 500 feet is that other one that's
that
being
was
sold?
1910 North
All right.
Second Street.
Well,
Yeah,
the other ones are 2039, so they're another block further. Yeah, like we said, most of the parking needs are gonna be met. There could, sometimes it could be, occasionally there might be 3 people there with cars. If that third, we can clearly say to people that only, two cars parked there. If there's more than 2 there, then you have to park at the outpatient.
And that facility has 14 spaces. I've been driving by it on my way home. It's usually has 4 or 5 spaces are occupied. And there's a dumpster in one of the spaces. But
So how far is that? I mean, that's beyond, well, farther than the other one, right?
it's
I mean,
1,473 feet.
okay, thanks. And is there any other parking available? Because he said if it wasn't the 2 on site, then you automatically go to the other one. I mean, is there any available parking anywhere else?
I looked, I spoke to the people who now own it's like part of the High Christian building. The people that own that building.
Tri-County Association.
Yeah,
Associated with
I
Liability.
made one offer to them, which they turned down, then I made them a significantly higher offer. I tripled my first offer, and they didn't even respond. I talked to the dry cleaner across the street about renting some space. So I'll continue to, I'm willing to rent spaces, I just haven't been able to find
yeah.
it.
And I think to
But
your,
like nothing on
I think to your
streets or
question-
anything like that?
there is. I mean, I think it depends what time of the day you're there, but there is parking along one side of Kelker Street between Second and Front, the stretch of Kelker, and having driven around just at various times of the day, there is occasionally on-street spaces there, and there may be on-street spaces on Second Street as well. Generally, further to the north and along the frontage of the Association of the Blind building, I think you generally find some, a space or 2.
I also went to the closed restaurant that's the other side of the, and I can see they can't rent me any spaces. That is packed.
Well, and the immediate neighbor to the west, it's an interesting building. You can park underneath it, and there's parking behind it, and share a property line. And our building actually is right on the property line. And there's probably 11 spaces abutting the building, and they had no interest in using spaces.
No, and there's still a couple people I'll reach out to, like Marikey, it's similar nonprofit organization, has a place right at Second and, right at front in that same block. And I haven't spoken to them yet. I've tried to call them a couple times. Although they look like they have a parking lot of about 15 spaces, but I don't know if they'll be open. They're a big organization. I'll have a hard time finding someone
Right.
who will prove it. But it's not, like I say, and I did a walk myself. I walked like 2 or 3 blocks in every direction around the building, and I counted a significant number of on-street parking spaces, at least 10 or 15. However, that was during the day, you know.
Right.
At night, I'm sure, you know, people are at home.
And what, in figuring out the requirements, regardless of whether you permit them to have vehicles or not, I'm just looking at what they may be. So what is it based on? Bedrooms or?
Yeah, basically units, which is bedrooms.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Not
there'd
the
be
number of people or
9.
anything.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep.
Okay.
We're asking for a reduction from 9 to 2. And because we can provide those 2 spaces on site that are existing today.
Right, and nothing's being, other than the number of people that would increase, I mean, nothing else is being changed,
No,
right? I mean, there was 9 bedrooms, there is 9 bedrooms, that's,
Exactly. There
right.
could be some minor changes inside, but nothing exterior would change. Like if we move some people around, move offices around, you know, there might be a room that's now office that will turn into a bedroom. Then we got to figure out where they're going to be. So there could be some minor changes inside, but nothing significant.
There wouldn't be more than 9 bedrooms.
Yeah, there wouldn't.
Right.
There's not going to
Right.
be more than 9 bedrooms. No,
Right.
we're not creating any more bedrooms.
right.
So, just for my clarity, so you said it's 9, the request is for 12, but it's for
The
9.
request is not for 12. Well, you.
Yeah. So under the way the code's written now,
Mhm.
the only limitation on the number of residents is based on the square footage of the rooms. So 50 square feet per resident per room, which is less than the state. So basically, the occupancy requirements of the city code would limit the number of people that are permitted. Under the prior ordinance, basically it said the definition of a family is no more than 8 unrelated people living together as a family unit. So that's how the 8 resident limitation was put in place, because this was a semi-compliant use, I would say, back in 1996, 1998. So that's where the limit on the current use, or up until the new zoning code was passed, was 8. Now the limitation on the number is based on the building code. So the 12 is a bit of a red herring that was a remnant of a prior application from about 15 years ago.
The square footage spot for bedroom space.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Just curious, this was somewhat mentioned, but so the space that, what is the space being used for now? What I guess would be involved in terms of any changes that would be required for that space to be
There may
changed? of
be
use?
people in rooms that really are historically or should be bedrooms that we have offices in now. So those people would move into other areas of the building. We have a finished, what used to be a garage is now a finished space. We may put some offices in there so that they would free up those bedrooms for people to be in those rooms.
Okay,
But
thank
the
you.
use has been conducted for quite some time.
Got you. Okay, that's one other question. This is really kind of related to a comment that was made. So, in the case where if you had to use parking that was at a different space, which was, I believe, 2043 North 2nd Street, which I think you said was over 1,400 feet away from the subject property. So there was a mention that, of course, the residents are not permitted to have vehicles. You can kind of monitor that right at your building, with the spaces at your building, but how would that be, how would you propose you would monitor that if you did have spaces that were so far away from your building?
First of all, as I was mentioning earlier, I've been a client again. So it's a highly structured, supervised environment. It's not, we're not just renting people rooms. We're controlling their whole lives, really. You know, so it's, is it impossible? No, it's not impossible, but it's not very likely to happen. First of all, for the most part, they're not gonna have cars, even if we didn't have the rule. These are indigent people who had serious drug problems, who have burned all their bridges, who have nothing, for the most part. Even if they, you know, the idea of them trying to sneak or have a car that we don't know about, it's theoretically possible, but it's very unlikely.
Let me ask you, does that happen, I mean, as of now, I mean, it's been there for a long time, and
It's never happened before.
never happened before,
Or in
and
any
you've
other
also,
of our places.
right, and you've also had that rule in place this whole time, that
Yes, and
they're not
other-
permitted to have
And we
cars.
have that rule in other places. And Gannenzia services 15,000 people a year. That's, in different levels of care. That's not all residential, but it might be 7,000 people a year in residential care. So,
But also, I think it would be appropriate, if the board was inclined to grant the request, to put the condition that the residents aren't allowed to have cars, right?
yeah.
Put it in the order.
Right.
And I could make sure that we post something in a, you know,
No, but that's a, yeah. something like
that the client signs something that they're not allowed to have cars. I think they do already that amount of time.
But Mr.
Right.
Hobbs, I think your question may have been more related to the staff, since they're the people that have the cars. How would we make sure that our staff park at the other facility?
No, it was more so just
Okay.
about the comment that was made about residents earlier, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who operate programs similar to Gannenzia are less rigid than us, or a little more lax in terms of the living arrangements, and once they, you know, they may provide support. Keep in mind, we have a whole culture and legacy of being an extremely regimented environment. And we're not quite as regimented as we used to be, but we still, we're very much on top of the client's behavior in our facility.
Got you. Alrighty, thank you.
Yeah.
Solicitor O'Connor,
Yep.
want the originals
Yeah. Because otherwise, it's not gonna. All right, we just.
Yes, in regards to application 2580, I would like to make a motion to approve this special exception to expand a non-conforming use and the reduction of off-street parking from 9 spaces to 2, with the condition that residents will agree to not bring vehicles to the property.
Second.
Second? Okay, it's been moved and properly second. Question? All in favor?
Aye.
So with regard to the variance, that was, we were really looking at that with regard to the other property that was a little over 500 feet. Additionally, they've approved the special exception considering the other one is 473 feet. I would take it that you maybe want to withdraw it, that application, the variance, you don't need that
We don't
decided
need
or
that.
anything.
If the
Yeah.
special exception is granted, that was just in the alternative.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, really what we were looking at is something much closer,
Right.
you know, even than the fourth, you know, it's broad. So
Withdrawn.
why don't you just, on the record, just say withdrawn the variance?
Withdraw the variance request.
Okay.
Thank you, good point.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you,
Sounds
guys.
good.
Thank
Then
you
we'll just
very
send a
much.
written decision, okay?
Great,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Sean, yep, you too.
All right, thanks, Sean.
So, Steve, our second case, our solicitor, we'll read it in for the record.
Okay, so we have application 2581, 300 Hale Avenue. And the board exhibits are B1, proof of publication, Patriot News, May 5th and May 12th, 2024. B2 is letter dated May 16, 2024, sent from the planning director to the applicant notifying of the hearing. B3 is a hearing notice posting on the property. B4 is the applicant's notification letters and certificate of mailing to require neighbors. B5 is the application. B6 are the plans for the proposal. B7 are photos of the property. B8 are applicant bylaws. B9 is the agreement to purchase the property signed by the applicant. B10 is a deed to the property. B11 is Planning Bureau case report, and B12 is the City of Harrisburg Planning Commission resolution of this. So we got B1 through B12.
Yes, so the case before the board involves the proposal to establish a new place of worship use on site. The proposed use requires any hearing board approval of a special exception application for properties in the residential low-density zoning district per section 7-305.7 of the zoning code. This project is largely converting from one nonprofit use to another. It was previously the headquarters of the Girl Scouts in the heart of Pennsylvania, I believe was their formal name. And so the building itself is laid out to kind of have large gathering spaces, some office spaces, very similar to what you would see for a church. So the proposal itself to convert the internal space into a place of worship use, makes sense from that perspective. The types of uses, as far as the impacts on the community, are fairly similar. Much as you'd have a once a week, consistent attendance on Sundays for this, but they would have office hours during the week. So the property will be open, kind of all week long, very similar to kind of what was previously operating on site. And the property itself has 43 off-street parking spaces in 2 lots to the north and south of the building. Based on the number of potential congregants and seats that they would need to have 44. It does appear as though there is potential to create an additional space or 2 within the existing lots. However, the applicant has also noted that they have an agreement with the Harrisburg School District to provide overflow parking at the Marshall Math Science Academy, which is located just catty corner to this site, so it's within the 500 feet buffer provided by the zoning code. The applicants had noted that it's probably rare that that's going to be the case, maybe on some more attended services like Mother's Day or Easter or Christmas. So it's probably very infrequent, if any, that they would need to use that. And otherwise, the proposed use is in conformance, with the zoning code, and the site itself seems to, be well accommodating for a use of this type. With all that being said, the Planning Commission recommended that the Zoning Hearing Board approve the request with the following conditions. The applicant should consider installing a pedestrian walkway and separate gates so that parishioners and other visitors can access the building separately from the vehicular entrances. Right now, there's no pathway or sidewalk connection. Anybody walking into the site, which is fully enclosed by a fence, walks through a driveway area. The applicant should install the proposed bike parking near the main entrance and, if possible, ensure that it is sheltered. And finally, the Planning Bureau recommends that the applicant install landscape screening along the exterior boundaries of the parking lots on site to bring the property into conformance with the current zoning regulations and to prevent headlight spillover onto adjacent residential properties. There is no current landscape screening that the current zoning code requires. That's a legal nonconforming aspect of the site, but the applicant in their submission documentation indicated that they were looking at landscaping and things of that nature, so we felt it was prudent to make a recommendation that they put that landscape screen in there if they're going to be doing that anyway. The Planning Commission recommends that the zoning hearing board approve the request for the following reasons. The proposed use will be similar in intensity and types of activities to the use that was previously on site, and which, to the Planning Bureau's knowledge, create no adverse impacts for the surrounding neighborhood. And the project advances the purpose of the RL zoning district provided in Chapter 7-305.4B of the code, as it establishes a low-intensity use that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and advances the community development objectives outlined in Chapter 7-301.27 of the zoning code.
Yes, sir. Okay. I'm Pastor Reginald Covington. My address is 2312 Abbey Lane, Harrisburg, 17112. Yes. So our church, right now, we're in Harrisburg. We're in the same zip code as 300 Hill Avenue. We actually have our 25-year anniversary next year, so we're a pretty established church. Prior to the pandemic, we were considering renovating our current space. It's about 36,000 square feet. Before the pandemic, we were averaging about 175, 160 people between that range for a Sunday service. During the pandemic, we brought up a live stream so people could live stream our services. And then once things opened up after the pandemic, we recognized that not all of our congregants were coming back to in-person attendance. So right now we average probably around 110, 115 in-person attendance and about 50 people who live stream. So because of that, we felt like it was more prudent to get a smaller space. So we got a real estate agent, and we were able to come across the 350 Hill Avenue building, which is about 15,000, 16,000 square feet, and it perfectly suits the size of our congregation. So instead of renovating a 36,000 square foot space, we decided it was more prudent to use the tithes and offerings of the members to renovate a much smaller space, with much lower utility costs and things of that nature. So it's just a better, all-around better fit for us. Yes, sir.
How many? Right, well, that's not it, though. It's more where you would live. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly how far you are. Well, just to tell them where you live and,
Oh, okay. Mhm. Okay. No, sir.
what, I don't know, what is the distance anyway? Is there some distance, some specific? Right. Right.
This board is double.
Well, right.
Well, we raised Cambridge.
Right. And let me, you feel you can be perfectly objective in reviewing this and all that, okay.
I just want to make sure for the record. Okay. So, let's turn to my right. Questions?
Just curious, Mr. Covington, since you are going to be using the building differently than the previous organization, did you have any interaction with neighbors to that property about what you're planning to do with the building?
Other than sending out the letter of notice, no. And then reaching out to the Science Academy across the street to see if we could use their parking for parking. But I will say this, our current church is about 6 minutes away, drive, and we have several members that live in the community. So it's not like we're coming from York or something like that. Like we have members that work at the high school that's down the street. They've all attended that high school. So we're essentially the same neighborhood, just 7 minutes away.
Gotcha. And I think you listed all of you have all of the renovations. Yeah, I was just wondering what types of changes need to be conducted to the building. But yeah, I see you have them listed here. So I think that's all the questions that I have. Thank you.
Mhm. No, no, sir.
Let me just ask, so the capacity, is that the 175 seats? Is that what it is? Or
Yeah.
is that what the congregation could be on a very busy Sunday? Is that what it, I just noticed 175, which would be 44.
Right.
But I also think that in the Planning Bureau case report, it said there were 44. However, due to some configurations, it could be as much as 46. Is that,
There are 43 on site, and I think there's space. I even measured it using the county's text parcel viewer to make sure that the southernmost parking lot was wide enough that you could create 2 parallel parking spaces on the north side of that lot, and that would be like it's just one parking space short of what the requirement is. They could easily, I think, in my opinion, create a space on site.
in those, right, on
Yeah.
site? All right.
Yeah, I didn't consider it. I don't think I felt comfortable using a residential space. I think the school works well because when we're open, the school is closed. We are open on Sunday. Our service starts at 10 a.m. There's no school happening Sunday at 10 a.m. And then we have our Bible studies on Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Unless the school is having a parent-teacher conference, then the school at that time will be closed. I don't anticipate we reached out to the school just to kind of cover all the bases, but, our congregation size will average about 120 people on a Sunday. We probably average about 35 to 40 cars that are used. And we also have van transportation for our church. So really the school was for Easter, Mother's Day, those services where you get that bump. For this Resurrection Sunday, Easter, we had 168 people.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
that was-
right, which still, but the other things, like I said, Bible study, if there is anything else during the week or anything, they're not nearly as large though.
No, it's a third. So our
Right,
Bible
yeah.
study attendance is around 40 people.
Right, right, so, all right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Or Rooney Road, or Torndale, because that's all.
And for those larger ministries, we would also have parking and grounds ministry, men who are out there to make sure that no one's parking in those. But I mean, there's ample street parking during those times. I think the street cleaning is on a day where, yeah. So we wouldn't have an issue. As long as street cleaning is not on Sunday, we're cool.
Right, Sunday, right, they're probably, right, there'd be street parking available and all that, so, yeah. That's all I have too. You can do whatever you want, you can make a motion if you want, or.
All right, I would like to make a motion for application 2581 to approve the special exception application for 300 Hale Avenue.
Second?
And going back to the original motion, and that is with the conditions from the planning commission resolution, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, Mr. Phipps, you second that motion? Okay. Then,
In favor?
Aye.
Aye. Exceptions? Thank you, sir. Thank you, neighbor. Thank you.
yeah, so we'll send a written decision to you and you'll get it, within 30 days or so.
Conducted, so I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, move second.
Approved. Yeah. If you're gonna make the motion. Yep. I agree.
Like, you'll get the letter within 45 days, but if you want to process the sale tomorrow or something like that, you can do that.